Friday's an easier day, so, you know,
The only thing I
early
have is,
afternoon is fine.
I have, I could be like probably, I could do 1 or I can do
Mhm.
after 3 because, I'm going to meet at, the station with the Erie House.
Well, that's the Erie House I was having trouble with.
Okay,
Just getting, KE information and
oh,
stuff like that.
okay, I'll leave it
Yeah,
out by tomorrow.
yeah. Andrew's coming up with the rest of the stuff, I'll just go over there. Maybe we'll get the first copy here.
Thank you.
Over there.
Inaugural.
This thing. And
It's 5:30, he hasn't texted me yet, we go onto our Facebook just to see, so I can keep a lookout.
Lenny calling in? Oh, here he is. Clicking.
You hear his, cut glass shoes?
Yeah, what's his?
Stepping on,
Oh,
coming on the
wow.
wood.
What, do we got the same sweater on? Look at this, Simon, look at, we got the same sweater on.
What is
that?
Old Navy. Old Navy. What's
See, we
going
got
on,
the same
everybody?
ribbing on it
Right.
too, like that's on the sleeves.
Alright, I should wear my blue one. We're just waiting for.
We
the
are
rest of it.
live.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Oh, wait.
Okay, we waiting for Andrea?
Yes.
Okay, I will give her,
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Here's the timeline. There. Let me see here. Okay.
I got those, forgot about. Oh, that's tea. Oh, I found out they sell some stuff at Walmart for glasses, it's called cat crap, and no fog as well.
oh, okay, I'm gonna
Hello.
call the meeting to order.
Yeah.
It is 5:30.
Thank you.
Set at 5:30.
How are you?
Okay, and I'll do, roll call for the Alderman. I see Alderman,
Alderman Scott Lennon?
Yep.
Alderman Nowak?
Okay, and, I think we're ready to go. So, this is the regularly, previously scheduled meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee. Scheduled for, today, this is the 4th February at 5:30. This is our agenda that we have here, is that correct, Ben, that we're looking at? And you just assigned some numbers to it on the pages?
Yes.
Okay, so, so the agenda is previously posted, with just some outline of where these specific items are in relation to, into the agenda. So, with that, I will turn it over to Ben Daish, who is the Budget Finance Director, to talk about agenda item number 1. Actually, I'm sorry, before I do that, open forum, and see if there's any, comment, from the public at this time.
I don't see any comments on
Okay.
there.
And I'll give a couple more minutes, to see if, somebody, will be, coming here today. Okay, I think, hearing and seeing no public comment, now we will be moving into the general fund revenue and expense summary. Ben Daish?
Yes, thank you, Alderman Santoy. And our previous meeting at the beginning of November, we presented what we felt the 2020 year would come in with data and transactional information sometime up until August and September. From that point, we had projected a loss of like revenue loss of somewhere around 4 million and a net deficit of around 2.5 million. Looking at the months after that, about 2 more months following that of data and available transaction, the outlook is less severe. It's more optimistic from and we'll get into a couple of reports after the summary that it leads us at this point with still maybe a month or two of transactional data remaining that the loss is not as severe as we thought in November. So if you look at your packet here, I have a table of contents, and the very first page is our general fund revenue and expense summary. And we still foresee around a $3.7 million revenue loss. However, our expenses, we incurred some significant expense reduction and of $2.3 million, which leads at this point our projected negative net change to be somewhere around a little over $1.3 million
This is a
for
2020 budget.
for 2020, where we originally budgeted 2020 to more or less break even. There is a loss, but I mean, we've met numerous times in the summertime, and of course, I mean, it's very difficult to predict then what the true impact on our locally what would be on our budget. And I will get into, and then from that point, we have further detail to these numbers within the packet itself. But we do have reason for optimism. Looking at 2021, we're projecting a modest loss of a little over $244,000. And then we are anticipating our revenues to grow in tandem of our expenditures to more or less break even in 2022 through 2024. And this is for our general fund. This is for our general fund.
And several months ago, these same projections were, how different were they?
They were significantly different.
Okay.
And remember, we had no growth in our revenues. And looking especially at the recent months, that's not realistic, even though we do, it is important to be conservative, but it really wasn't realistic given the fact the recent historical trends, the information and the statistics from the Illinois Department of Revenue, the Cook County transactions that it's reasonable to expect that our revenues are going to grow in tandem with our expenses, especially in 2022 through 2024. Now, of course, I don't work for GameStop or anything like that. I don't pretend to wave my crystal ball, but all I can go upon is some recent statistics and
What about
figures.
AMC?
AMC maybe, right? No,
Okay.
nothing like that. So, but if you flip the page to the second page.
Ben, before we
yeah.
move on, that 1.3 million in expense reduction. I mean, I could ask, I do want to ask, what was that, where was that, refresh your memory, but I think more importantly, the bigger question is, can we make those reductions permanent? Or can we carry those reductions forward? Or were they temporary in nature? And I think that's something that, I'd like to revisit. And we didn't talk about that previously, so, I don't want to spring it on you, but that's something that I think is worth looking into.
Understood.
Yeah.
And in order to make a comment on it, of course, we
Yeah.
don't have the department heads in here,
Uh-huh.
and obviously they've been able to scale back on numerous things. I will note in the company pages. I mean, we had salary reductions, we had
Mhm.
health insurance, some major health insurance reductions,
Yeah.
and things where all of our department heads have chosen to work leaner, and obviously scaling back on some capital projects or some professional services for various,
Okay.
those are some items.
So maybe it's not all of them, but I think some of them. So what, and what degree of that 1.3 is carried over into 2021, the reduction in expenditures?
I think you're looking at the 2.3 For the expenditure reductions.
He's
One
looking at
point-
he's looking at the net change. Did we basically just use the general funds to take care of that, is what it looks like?
I'm sorry, you're right, I'm
Yeah.
looking at, so that 2.3, the reduction in
Yes.
expenses of 2.3. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, carrying forward or, you know, maintaining. So, how much of that has been accounted for in the 2021 draft?
It is considered. Some items are considered as far as where things are trending.
Mhm.
For instance, I remember
Yeah.
last time you mentioned a good chunk of that was our rec center was closed most of last year. So he revised the numbers. Remember last time, we're like, how far can we take these reductions into 2021? Because we just didn't know at that time how far this pandemic would be going.
Sure.
So right now, our programs are still pretty much stalled at the rec center. So did you take those numbers into account for the 2021 draft?
That's correct. The first quarter, we ended up,
Okay.
revenues were ceased and company and labor, payroll expenditures were put on hold.
So that one at least
Yeah.
was able to carry through till right now, just because of COVID, we can't open up
Mhm.
safely. And all of our a lot of our senior, activities, those have been stopped because we
Yeah.
can't have groups of more than 25 still, if we follow the county,
Okay.
so.
I think maybe just once we get past this budget and the approval, maybe that's something we can revisit, because obviously the rec center can't stay closed forever.
Yeah.
But there are other things that were reduced as well, and what can be carried forward and what's not realistic.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Understood. So if we flip the page, we're gonna look at the revenues and what happened in 2020 thus far, with us closing the year. And of course, the orange items indicate where we have revenue losses. And, the driver of the revenue loss, to where we normally, our fines, our parking tickets, where, we took the position not to enforce parking restrictions, especially during the shelter in place, and where we had the economic downturn, as well as, with people having to stay home. And yes, our revenue from parking tickets, were dramatically lower than what we thought the 2020 budget. Other items like real estate transfer tax and our utility taxes, they were thus far there, it appears that they're down. As well as, the rec, as we talked about the rec department. It's, one thing to take note of in this is the transfer from other funds. That is the overall, Berwyn Securitization Corporation. That's the combination of all the state taxes, state income taxes, local use tax, home rule, and state sales tax. What I'm seeing in recent months is that those numbers are holding very equivalent to 2019. We have not seen an adverse impact, knock on wood, hopefully not so far. And it does provide some basis of optimism. No local use tax, of course, as we talked about before, that's related to your online sales. So that amount, yes, it was lower than what we thought it was, but it's a lot less severe than we had feared, 6 to 8 months ago. Another notable item is your interest income. We're not gonna be making as much money on our bank accounts as year last, because with interest rates being so low, there's policies that banks are gonna start charging people just to have your money in their bank account. So I do foresee those items becoming lower, this year alone. Now, 2022, 2024, it's uncertain. Again, our fines, those are one of the most adversely impacted. Now, from a revenue increase standpoint, both have to do with the fire department. Our paramedic collections and our reimbursement, the ambulance, as Chief Hayes had explained. We did see a significant uptick in those revenues, from a, sadly so though, with people, with the reality of COVID-19. But, those revenues, were larger than what we projected for the 2020 budget. And then we received the grant revenue for the CARES Act, so of $800,000.
And that just basically just reimburses for all the extra monies that we used for COVID, correct?
Correct.
Now, if we wouldn't have had that,
Yeah.
it would be more tragic.
Yeah.
And now the X factor in all that is whether Congress whether they're gonna pass another relief package. There's arguments on both sides of the item. One party is saying they don't want us help out the state and local municipalities. This is what I'm reading, and then the other side is yes, we need to provide some support. But with that being said, we're not at a point where we can budget for something like that in 2021. So if you look at this, these categories amount to like $2.8 million of the total revenue negative variance. And, it's, as we're projecting forward, it's whether or not, these items are, we do, in many of these items, we are seeing recent evidence that those items that are in the negative for 2020 are starting to uptick. Okay? So that's on the revenue side. Any questions, any more questions as looking up there?
So, what's the difference again between the 2.7 and the 3.6?
2.8 are these items that I've shaded in the combination of the orange items, all the material dollars that drive, and then the green items are the positive variances. So that combination is close to $2.8 million. The total revenue variance is 3.648 million.
So those are variances below 100,000?
Correct.
So there's other variances, 60,000, 30,000, probably
Correct.
several sheets worth, okay.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
these are just the majors.
Yep.
Okay.
So as we flip the pages to the expenditures, I touched upon it earlier. Yes, we had salary reductions. I know with whether it's Public Works, whether it's the Rec Department, various other salary reduction measures, made a contribution of over $1.1 million. And in addition to our health insurance, when we projected the budget for 2020, we were projecting perhaps a 10% increase in the budget. Well, the city's been able to negotiate that after that increase to within 1%. That's a huge help to our budget in that regard. So, we had some relief there as cost savings. Professional services, there's whether it's tree cutting, whether it's whatever services that we felt can be without impacting the residents that can be set aside. It appears that was in place, and otherwise, those are some items that we experienced dramatic cost savings, and then the items that we incurred cost negative variances. I think involved all the energy and effort, the social distancing, the civil unrest, all that energy that was expended to, help the city maintain control, maintain civility and things like that. We had some cost overruns there, but of course that's offset by the cost savings. And those items, similar to what I presented on the revenue side, those expenses, the major items, amounted to $1.8 million out of the $2.3 million in overall cost reductions. And included in these cost overruns was the COVID-19 expenditures that, as Ruth had mentioned, was absorbed by the CARES Act money. And again, if you look at the salaries and, that's where that CARES Act grant really was a huge benefit, where it offset the overruns there.
So unused time buyback, that's obviously we budgeted less, it's more?
Yes, it is more, and it's related to, officers working more and, their benefit time being, not being able to use their benefit time. So that's, yeah. So the next, pages 4 through 22, that was, that's all the details. To, similar format as when we met in November, but, difference is it's going line by line with transactions that have been posted, over, 10 to 11 months into the year. And being able to, come up with a projection. From there. So yes, and after going past the detail, if you look at page 23, I'm sorry, 21. That's some of the detail to the, page 21 has a detail with the Berwyn municipal securitization. And that represents the state income, state local use, state sales, home rule. And as you can see, our projected amount based on the Illinois Department of Revenue, it's holding strong, given the fact that for a month and a half to 2 months that retail was shut down. So, and it just gives us a basis to reasonably project some sort of, some growth in the forward years, 2022 to 2024. But if you look at the 2021 projection, it's very consistent with what we're projecting for 2020.
Yeah. So on the budget, 2021 budget draft, usually we have a summary line at the bottom?
Yes, we'll flip one more page.
Okay, so
Yep.
it's on
Yeah.
22.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, I see.
And no, you have a big, one of the results of the securitization, pension bonds that was issued,
Mhm.
from an accounting standpoint, that's why you have a big, fund balance, but that's offset by the two, our debt service fund that you'll see when we present, as well as our public safety funding, that will offset that amount. From an accounting standpoint, the securitization, we have to present a big fund balance as a result of those bonds issued versus, but the key thing is that, you'll see that the same difference every year. And again, that's from an accounting standpoint, referring to the big bond issue and what you call amortization. But the mechanics of this fund is that the city receives the receipts from the taxes goes to this entity. And the entity sets aside the money needed to pay the debt service on the 2019 bonds. And whatever is remaining there, that's sent to the general fund. There's a account code called transfer to other funds. And that's where you see these numbers, the general fund receives these numbers. So that's the interrelationship of the securitization fund with the general fund. finally, what we have here is, capital projects fund. We had spoken with our department heads, primarily, the fire department, public works, and the police department. And we talked about some of their capital needs that they're experienced down, over the next, 3 to 5 years. And we made a determination that those departments need to make some sort of operating contribution to this fund to help absorb future outlays that take place. And sure enough, we budgeted accordingly. We foresee that, in 2021, we're able to absorb the capital needs that the department heads have presented so far. But we just gotta be mindful, 2022 to 2024, we are seeing, a deficit, but we don't know as far as, these expenditures, what are funded by grants, what are also, as far as what perhaps any transfer that could take place or reimbursements that took place. It's very difficult for us to project that. But it's important for us to be able to present that, yes, there's gonna have to be some sort of funding for future needs of, all of our capital needs in the departments, so. With that, is there any further questions on the attachments?
Just walk me again where the general fund is subtotal.
So on page, you mean in the detail report that you're looking at?
Yeah, so.
Let's go to page,
Page 20 is where it
20?
ends,
yes.
but then where does all that get subtotal?
Wait a minute, I have it. I hope I didn't cut that page off. I have it, I can,
Maybe it's, securitization.
46 is the last with the, and then we have 21. Where is this cut off, guys?
Cut off, okay.
Yeah, the last department is the senior services, and we're missing a page. The totals, I can definitely,
So you have it there, it just didn't make it these.
yeah, I mean, I could have it in a couple minutes. If you
Yeah,
guys
let's
want.
make a copy, I
Yeah.
always like to see in the
Yeah.
context of.
Yeah, let me
Okay.
print that and bring it right
And
up.
then we could just amend it to
Yeah,
whatever we're doing.
yeah, we can. Give me a couple minutes.
Sure.
I'll bring it right up.
Or,
Yeah.
There's one thing that we probably could look at. I know we had that sales tax share with Tony's as part of the redevelopment agreement.
Correct.
I know, it's long-term, but can we get an update soon of where we're at with that? To see, I know, Myers was a $25 million a year business, and Tony's is approximately a $50 million business. So that tax share will, it won't go on as long as it would have if Myers was there, just to see where we're at, if we're on target,
No problem.
so in that after we wrap this up, we will talk about the timeline.
Mhm.
My apologies, guys, here you go.
Kept us in suspense.
Thank you, bud.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Yep.
It would've bothered me all night long. Okay, well, now that we. I think the key here, and this is why this is important, the change in the fund balance was a lot higher and as projected
Yeah.
in previous versions of the draft, right? We were looking at, I think, was it, correct me if I'm wrong, 6 figures every year?
Yeah, within I mean, like, we projected it just be like $6,000 for 2020. 2019 was close to 100,000. And obviously, you know, with the revenues being impacted, we're still thinking our loss at this point is gonna be $1.4 million, 1.3.
Right, but I'm saying in subsequent years, our budget, our change in fund balance, so the loss to the fund balance is less than 100,000 in 22 and 23, and then in 24 it goes down to 12,000, where in previous iterations that was much higher.
It's fluctuated, I mean, saw it as low as like with 50,000.
Okay.
It just, in past years, our revenues have been, in line with our expenses, in that regard over the past few years. I know in 2018, we were in a deficit, a council-approved deficit of, close to $800,000, but other than that, we've been primarily at break-even point.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and that was a major concern, was fund
Yeah.
balance going forward, and it's encouraging to see it,
Yeah.
addressed at this level.
And that's the thing, having that fund balance policy and city administration being able to preserve that 60% fund balance policy to absorb, what happened last year and any other emergency catastrophes like that, that's where it's very vital to be able to keep that preserved.
And that way, when we do go out and have our credit rating, they take a look at that also, right?
Yes. Yeah, having that cushion, is a huge factor in us.
Okay. And we're a triple B negative or triple B?
Yes, with a negative outlook.
Yep.
Okay, great, well, we talked about, only 3 items, 2021
Yeah.
budget draft, and,
And make no mistake, we're working to improve that. Unfortunately, like most municipalities, the pension situation certainly doesn't help matters as far as credit rating and other municipalities. So.
No, and they rate them differently every time they rate them, so it's kind of one of those things too. Sometimes you don't really, maybe you have different criteria. Been through that.
yeah, okay. So let's talk, you have the budget, Berwyn budget timeline.
So, we are going to, our next, not this coming Tuesday, but the following council session, we're gonna present the draft of the citywide budget. That's incorporating all of our smaller funds, combined with the general fund and the funds we talked about. And it's a pretty lengthy, in-depth process that, the information is kicked out right from our system. So there's a process that we go through to confirm the numbers, and of course, any recent transactions that are posted in our system, we have to capture to get a good projection. So that'll be presented at the COW on February 24th. And then following that, council will have our aldermen will have about 2 to 3 weeks to look at that and come to me with any questions. And we are scheduled for March 9th to be the date that we'll have a budget hearing with any questions, and then it'll be up for council vote 8 p.m. on March 9th.
And the latest that this needs to be passed is by the 31st, so you have cushion in case for any reason whatsoever.
Yep.
If you needed to extend it to another council, you could.
Okay, great.
Okay. You might wanna just reach out to all of us, in between that time to make sure if anybody has questions or, wanna understand things, they can do that.
Okay, so, next agenda item, Ben, that we have, is this it? Was this the
Yeah,
last
any
agenda
other
item on this?
business? Yeah, this is more or less.
Okay, so if there's any new business,
No?
okay, hearing none, I will, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
Okay, made by Lennon, seconded by Noack, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
See you then.
And I'll just let them know that we are done. Perfect. Now look into that for you, Scott.
Yeah, it's just a kind of a pulse check, to see where I'm
So sorry, I
at.
didn't catch the missing page.
No,
the